On December 27, 1968, during one of the most turbulent years in U.S. history, Apollo 8 splashes down after its 6-day mission. But why was 1968 such a tempestuous year? And what made Apollo 8 perhaps the riskiest mission in NASA's history? 1968 was a mess. In January, the USS Pueblo was captured by North Korea. A week later, the Tet Offensive began in Vietnam, which led to U.S. President Lyndon Johnson's announcement that he would not be running for another term. In April, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis. Riots followed. In June, U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated in California. In August, anti-war protesters clashed with police at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. October brought the Summer Olympics to Mexico City, where American athletes John Carlos and Tommy Smith protested against racism with their controversial Black Power salute. It is one of the most tumultuous years in U.S. history, and it's near the end of this difficult year that Frank Borman, William Anders, and Jim Lovell headed out on Apollo 8, one of the most monumental in the history of the space program. 40-year-old Frank Borman was a West Point and Caltech graduate and an Air Force fighter pilot who was chosen in the second group of astronauts known as the Next 9 in 1962. He commanded the 14-day Gemini 7 mission in 1966 and participated in the investigation of the Apollo 1 tragedy that claimed the lives of 3 astronauts in a fire. His testimony before Congress played a major role in getting the Apollo program back online. Apollo 8 would be his final mission. 35-year-old William Anders was part of NASA Group 3 in 1963. He was a Naval Academy graduate who held a master's degree in nuclear engineering. Apollo 8 was his first and only mission in space. 40-year-old Naval Academy graduate Jim Lovell was one of NASA's most experienced astronauts. Like Borman, he was part of NASA Group 2 and had already flown to space before, accompanying Borman on Gemini 7 and as commander of Gemini 12, the final Gemini flight in 1966 with Buzz Aldrin. Post-Apollo 8, Lovell famously commanded the ill-fated Apollo 13 mission and was famously portrayed by Tom Hanks in the 1995 Ron Howard movie about that mission. Apollo 8 is, for me, the biggest jump forward in the history of the U.S. space program, even greater than Neil Armstrong's giant leap 7 months later on Apollo 11. Keep in mind that no manned mission had ever left Earth orbit before Apollo 8, so no human had ever traveled more than about 850 miles from the Earth's surface. The Moon is 239,000 miles from Earth. It was a dangerous leap forward from anything that had been tried before. In fact, in the lead-up to the mission, Susan Borman, the wife of Mission Commander Frank Borman, cornered NASA Flight Director Chris Kraft, demanding that he be straight with her about the chances that her husband would return safely. Kraft leveled with her, saying that odds were 50-50. Tellingly, she was pleased with his answer because she had been afraid the chances were even worse. Apollo 8 took 3 days to reach the Moon. The crew then successfully put the craft into lunar orbit. The crew then orbited the Moon 10 times, with each orbit taking about 2 hours. 45 minutes of each orbit was spent out of radio contact as Apollo 8 traveled around the dark side of the Moon. The astronauts took amazing close-up photos, the first humanity had ever seen so near the desolate Moon's surface. Their photos of the dark side of the Moon are the first glimpses humanity had of that half of the Moon, since it does not rotate on its axis like the Earth does. The most famous photograph was the stunning Earthrise picture taken by Anders, which is one of the greatest photos in history. On Christmas Eve, the astronauts gave a live broadcast while orbiting the Moon. In that broadcast, the astronauts read the creation story from the Book of Genesis, seeking to express the awe that the astronauts and the people back home were feeling as something so profound and inspiring was being accomplished. Borman, Anders, and Lovell returned home to celebrations from their families on a safe return, as well as a massive ticker tape parade in New York City. Time magazine named them as their Men of the Year, but the achievements of Apollo 8 are probably best summed up in a telegram sent to Borman that stated simply, "You saved 1968." Here are other events that happened today in history. In 1900, hatchet-wielding prohibitionist Carrie Nation smashes up a bar in Wichita, landing her in jail. In 1904, the play Peter Pan opens on London's West End, introducing the world to the character. In 1918, weeks after the World War I armistice, a Polish uprising begins against the occupying German army. In 1932, at the height of the Great Depression, Radio City Music Hall opens in New York City. In 1944, FDR seizes control of Montgomery Ward after its refusal to follow a World War II labor deal. In 2007, former Pakistani leader Benazir Bhutto, the first female leader of a Muslim nation, is assassinated. In 2020, Trump signs a $900 billion COVID relief bill that includes a second round of stimulus checks. And now it's time for our Today in History quiz. When did the first version of EA's Madden NFL video game series premiere? 1986, 1988, 1990, or 1992? Liked learning about the first manned mission to orbit the moon? Then you'll love this one about the last one to land on its surface. Tap the screen to keep the story going on Today in History.